Good day to you my friends, I'm Kenator and today I'm going to be reviewing Solar Expanse, which just launched into early access. You will be taking the lead of a space agency to further humanity's progress across the solar system and eventually beyond. In a game that puts realistic space travel simulation, logistics and space colony building front and centre. I've put about 30 hours into this one and it is unfinished as an early access title, so this will just be part review and part first impression, so stick around and let's run through how well it played. This is also a sponsored look at the game, but are we keeping things brutally honest as always. Solar Expanse starts off small. It's hard to imagine later in the game you will have ships flying around the solar system on the regular and dealing with the logistics management that entails. But every great journey starts from the first step. So after picking an agency that you want to lead, either from your own personal taste on the agency or the nice bonus perks they provide, your first step will simply be to launch a space telescope into orbit. Easy enough, we have a single launch rocket at our disposal and the telescope is already ready to go. Post launch you even get to see the telescope in orbit, which when zooming out really puts the scale into perspective as it quickly vanishes against the backdrop of Earth. Next up, you have to put a probe on the moon. The ample starting resources let you quickly and easily build your first probe and delivery vehicle. While hand-holding, this tutorial does teach you a great many aspects of selecting mission targets, payloads, fuel costs, and in the coming missions, crew supplies, research, reusable vehicles, building in low Earth orbit, as well as using mobile tools for automated resource extraction, refinement and building. While very low in output, this saves you so much fuel in not having to haul up supplies from Earth, which will be an ongoing problem for you to work around a lot in the early stages of this game. Another thing you will grapple with as the game progresses is timescales. Getting to the moon is but a blink of an eye compared to missions to asteroids and Mars, and that's before you take into account the accurate orbital mechanics of these celestial objects. 1 month an asteroid could be closer than Mars. A few months later it's off the other side of the system and you have astronauts waiting for their next food delivery. This is the crux of the game, sourcing and moving various resources to where you need them and want them to further your expansion. Shortly after the moon, however, the game's handholding really slows down, so if you love figuring things out on your own, this game is for you because there is so much more to discover, which brings me to a pain point. While there is a bunch of missions to follow, which are also a good way of earning funds, the game leaves a lot of stuff to player discovery through only trial and error instead of a lightly guided way of finding things. For instance, crew supply usage will be increased or decreased depending on the environment. You only really find this out via a tooltip, and you only find the tooltip probably by accident. While the system itself is great, the game suffers by not showing you that it's there in the first place. And this becomes a common frustration with many of the game systems. The problem with trial and error in a game like this is the hugely limited resources in the beginning. If you waste too much, it can leave you feeling stuck, or even worse, make it more of a chore to play than fun. Another issue that got in the way early on is the max fueling of ships for launch. Space fans will know mass is everything for space travel. Every unit of fuel loaded needs even more fuel loaded to the lift vehicle to get it up there, and this makes launches very expensive and resource draining. The game helps by having a useful optimal button for ship travel, but this doesn't always reduce the fuel loaded, and this has two effects. It can leave you with plenty of fuel for the return journey, or it can waste metric tons of fuel for no reason. I'd love to see a button for loading enough fuel for a return journey based on an optimum return journey too, as currently you have to judge this based on experience, and it's not really something you can calculate. Now this is easy enough for something like the moon at a fixed distance, but less so between planets. Eventually you'll have fuel production in a lot of places, but this does make the early game somewhat challenging in both a good and a bad way. At some point I had 2 of my 3 ships stranded with not enough fuel to return, and I needed to get my 3rd ship in the best place to launch a rescue from, get enough fuel there to attempt it, as well as enough to take with me to rescue the ships one by one. Pulling it off was highly satisfying, but ultimately unneeded stress too. I'd love to see this as some sort of rescue mission that pops up to help save ships or crew from other agencies though. At least it would be optional then. For one-way missions though, you don't need to worry. A lot of the missions you launch early on will be sending probes out to asteroids and planets. You just need to remember to set the fuel to minimum. I really like the discovery gameplay loop. The telescope will eventually scan around all the planets, moons and asteroids and even a few comets, and this will tell you what resources are on them, but not how much. That's what the probe is for, and once physically delivered to your target, it will go around and scan each deposit type to identify the total yield and rate of extraction. This way you can pick your best target before the most expensive task, or for sending people, food and building supplies and equipment so far from home. For these little outposts and colonies, the game is very forgiving in respect to survival supplies. Unlike with ships, your people won't die from running out. They will just stop working and use the habitat's survival systems to stay alive, giving you time to plan and execute resupply missions. Because when your ships might take 8 months for planet alignment and 15 months travel time, it really doesn't give you a lot of time to respond to emergencies. Oh, and speaking of emergency, while the game doesn't really have a story, so to speak, it did pop up with a little challenge mission I needed to solve. A planet killer asteroid heading to Earth. This was the only random event I encountered, and I really hope they make a lot more of these for players during the early access period, as it was a fun distraction from setting up my expansion plans. But expanding isn't all you do in this game. There are of course tools to start terraforming. As previously mentioned, each planetary object has its own survival rating. This includes temperature, atmospheric composition, pressure, gravity, radiation, just to name a few. And some of these can be mitigated to make your supplies last longer, or at least in the case of Mars, be completely transformed to support life suitably. The game also tackles the very real reason trying to do so with Mars in real life is pointless: the lack of a magnetic field. It will require a lot of research and a gargantuan amount of resources, but it can be done in game. You also have orbital mirrors and shades for temperature control, and the drastic approach of dropping asteroids on a planet too. Now speaking of research, the game currently has a very expansive tech tree that looks simple from the offset, with clearly defined trees for things like terraforming, ship propulsion and resource extraction, for example. But this is a little deceptive. There are multiple crosslinks between these trees that are not clearly shown, even though it does list them. Just looking at the tree is only half the story. But the tree does tell you one thing very quickly: the game will be played out over hundreds of years, with many of the tech unlocks taking thousands of days to complete. There's so much scale, the game has certain era checkpoints, so when you have met them, you unlock a different starting point that you can begin from in a new game. This is a really great addition, as I imagine the very beginning can get quite boring if you're doing it for the 5th time, before you ramp up to the later tech and progress. Some tech, however, like orbital stations, I found to be massively underwhelming. I wanted to make space colonies too, but after building a large ring station, I found it just to be habitation space only, ultimately useless. Which was a little sad for me, with seeing space farms and space alloys in the tech tree. It would have been cool to have things that were only craftable in space, as well as space only colonies that you could really develop into more than just a space hotel. Now running a space empire isn't cheap either, and mission rewards will only earn you so much. You can put those vast resources that you gather and produce with to work by setting up sell orders for other agencies to buy in location. Mars is good for this especially, or you can ship things back to Earth and sell at the global market there, which doubles as a cheap and quick way to get missing resources if you need them in a pinch, be it fuel or alloys for example. With a game of such scale, the devs have an equally ambitious plan for it too. Currently, the only option is to play through our own solar system, but they have already listed TRAPPIST-1 and Kepler-90 as alternate systems. Although these are currently disabled, there are slots for a few other systems to be revealed at a later date. This would give the game such a huge variety of settings to play in, and although I didn't play anywhere near long enough to reach it sadly, there are interstellar options hinted at in the research, of which finding exoplanets is one of them. Whether or not you can go there or not as of the launch build is unknown to me sadly, but with no FTL tech in the tech tree, even a one-way trip at or very close to light speed would still take 40 years at a minimum. But that's not all they have planned. On booting up the game, you are given a semi-revealed roadmap listing said other systems, mega structures, I'm hoping for some sort of Dyson Sphere project at some point, advanced space stations, loans, robot workers, and a stats screen, which I'm sure someone will use to track speedrunning at some point. But before all that, they will need to smooth out some of the very rough edges this game has. While I do give some grace to pre-release versions of games while I review them, this one had multiple crashes and quite a few in-game bugs. A big one that really nearly stopped my progress beyond the belt was using gravity assist missions. This is where you could fly out to say Mars and use its gravity to slingshot out faster and further than you could have gone with just the ship's own thrust and maximum propellant, or simply to save fuel. Anytime I would try these gravity assists, the game would delete my cargo or delete my crew. The ship arrives empty or without a key asset that I sent out with it in the first place, and this became very frustrating. There was a slightly beneficial bug I even ran into where I could launch the equivalent of a Starship up a stage from Mars to Mars orbit for free, as it required zero fuel. Other points of frustration were like the UI hiding information from you. For instance, if you have run out of resource a factory needs, the factory no longer shows you which resources it uses, and you have to check the build menu for the building to get this info. But as long as it's running, it's fine and it shows you. Another was the game not showing or telling the player how some ships can be used. One of the unlocks is a fuel-free solar sail ship. These are great for transferring resources all around the system, but are clearly a ship for space only. So I thought it was safe to assume that they can only pick things up in orbit and drop off in orbit only. And this is entirely not true. They can pick up from asteroids, how is beyond me, and they can also pick up cargo from a planet or moon surface as part of a scheduled mission if the location in question has means of launching cargo into orbit by itself. Also, while on scheduled missions, there is no way to find where the craft currently is if it's awaiting cargo to be filled or if there's been a problem with fuel, for example. You can only cancel the mission, find the ship manually and reschedule it. I can also imagine with no filter, late game can be a nightmare to manage these scheduled missions when you have more than 20 or 30 of them going at once, or heaven forbid over 100, as it only gives you a list rather than limiting them to the location involved. Thankfully, a lot of these could be solved easily with a little time and if the devs are willing. This could really cut down on missing info and improve quality of life a lot. That being said, I'd still recommend picking this up even if you wait a while to play it. The game has a great foundation in terms of style and gameplay. It has Expanse vibes in the soundtrack that I never got bored of listening to, and sometimes I would just zoom out and play the game at max speed just to watch the system revolve around, while my scheduled route shuttled around the system. Its future replayability will be great with more systems and tech added to it too, and with a launch price of $15, it's hard to say no to. So if you're a fan of management style sims, logistics, micromanagement and empire building, then it's really a no-brainer. But if the game's not quite there for you yet, definitely put it on your wishlist to keep an eye on it. Now let me know in the comments what you are looking forward to the most, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more sci-fi and space gaming content and reviews, and I will see you guys in the next one. Kenator, out.